Morning, everybody. We are in Hebrews chapter 9, verses 1 through 10 this morning, and it reads, "Now the first covenant also had regulations for ministry in an earthly sanctuary. For a tabernacle was set up, and in the first room, which is called the holy place, were the lampstand, the table, and the presentation loaves. Behind the second curtain was a tent called the most holy place, and it had the gold altar of incense and the ark of the covenant, covered with gold on all sides, in which was a gold jar containing the manna, Aaron's staff that budded, and the table and the tablets of the covenant. The cherubim of glory were above the ark, overshadowing the mercy seat. It is not possible to speak about these things in detail right now. With these things prepared like this, the priests enter the first room repeatedly, performing their ministry, but the high priest alone enters the second room, and he does that only once a year and never without blood, which he offered for himself and for the sins of the people had committed in ignorance. The Holy Spirit was making it clear that the way into the most holy place had not yet been disclosed, while the first tabernacle was still standing. This is a symbol for the present time during which gifts and sacrifices are offered that cannot perfect the worshiper's conscience. They are physical regulations and only deal with food, drink, and various washings imposed until the time of the new order." And this is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. All right. Thank you, Devin. Have a seat for the last time today, as far as you know. All right. As we get into this section, I want to tell you, I feel a little bit of deja vu. I feel like the author is hammering this point home over and over and over again, right? What are we talking about again this morning? The Old Covenant, right? We're talking about the priests, the tabernacle. It's this, the author's trying to convince us that the new system, the new way of doing things is better than the old way, that Christ is better than not just the angels and not just the law, but he spent a lot of time talking about this covenant and how there is a new covenant. So, one of the problems I have is, number one, okay, we just get it, right? And the second is, and this is my particular challenge, is how do I keep preaching the same thing over and over and over again and make it sound original when it's not original? Well, that's my problem, not yours, so let's see how we do this morning, all right? So I did get to thinking, though, how many of you have ever been to the doctor's office or the ophthalmologist, the eye doctor, and had to go through one of these, sit behind one of these, right here on the screen, right there? That. Anyone ever seen one of those? When you get behind one of those, what do you got to do? Yeah, better one or two. Better A or B. Better two or three. Right? And eventually you get to the point where you're like, I don't even know anymore. I don't know which is better. Why are they going through all of that? Yeah, they're trying to figure out where's your eyesight, which one is better on the right, the left? Do you have 20/20 vision? Do you have better than that? Or if you're like many of us in the room, you got to end up getting glasses because you're blind, right? Without my glasses, this book looks really bad. But that's exactly what the author is now doing, right? He's between the beginning of chapter 9 and the second part of chapter 9, he's playing a comparison game between the old covenant and the new covenant so that we'll understand which one is better. Is it number one or is it number two? See, which is the problem? We know the answer, right? So why is he trying so hard? Because we know the answer, but the people in his day didn't. And as human beings, I don't know if you know this about us, but we cling to the things we know and are familiar with, to the things we can see and feel and touch. We want, particularly in our day and age, you got to give me proof. Give me evidence. Show that I need some scientific, documented, peer-reviewed proof of all these things, which poses a problem for a system based on faith. Right? And it's a particular problem in the author's day because he's saying, look, the old system is no good. The new is better. It's replacing the old. But the old system, as of this writing, which I think we don't fully get sometimes, the old system was still in place. Right? There was still a tabernacle, a temple at the time in Jerusalem. There were still priests going into that temple and doing their daily duties. There were still priests Once a year, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest would enter into the Holy of Holies to offer sacrifice on behalf of all God's people to bring us atonement. So all of that, literally, someone from Jerusalem could step outside their door and see the temple. And the author is saying, what you can see, what you know, what you can feel and touch and hear and smell, that's no good anymore. There's a new thing. Now, where's this new thing? Not really anywhere, right? Where can you go see it and feel it and touch it when the author's writing? What's the answer to that question? Nowhere. So for the Israelites living in this day, what was real to them was the temple. They could see it. It was real. But what the author is trying to tell them is sometimes even what you see is not real. Anyone ever seen a magic trick? And you watch it and you're like, oh my goodness, that person is possessed by the devil. Now, we know, right? We know in our modern sensibilities, is any of it real? No. Is it magic? No. What is it? It's an illusion. In fact, you ever watch those shows where they show you how it's done? I don't like those. You know why I don't like those? Because they make me feel stupid. I should have known that. And it ruins it, doesn't it? Well, that's exactly what the author is doing in this particular section, is he's trying to ruin the illusion of the temple. Now, the temple was a real place, but I will give you a little hint. Before long, after this, the temple goes away. In 70 AD, the temple is destroyed. God said, this thing is too real. You keep clinging to it, so I'm going to knock it down so that you can't go to the temple anymore. Because there's something new that I want you to go to. All right? So that's what he's trying to do, is he's exposing the fakeness, the fake news of the temple. Now we understand that, right? You ever heard of the deep fakes? AI is taking over, right? Can't tell what's real or fake anymore. I got to tell you, I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole today, this week. Yeah, there's me skydiving. Yeah, doesn't that look exciting? Look, I wanted to do some more stuff this week. How about this one? Yeah, I climbed Mount Everest this week as well. Actually, what I did was I skydived into base camp, and then I climbed Mount Everest, but I didn't want to finish it there. I figured the Broncos could use some help, right? So, in case you didn't realize, none of that's real. You know how long it took me to do that, by the way? All three of these? It took me about 5 minutes. It took me 20 minutes if you count the time it took for me to Google finding one of these that was free. But after that, I just gave the system a photo of me, and I said, give me an image of me skydiving. Bloop, spit it out. Give me one climbing the Mount Everest. Bloop, spit it out. Give me one as the quarterback of the Broncos. Now that jersey's not quite right, so it's not perfect, but boy, it looks pretty good, right? By the way, I wish that's how I actually looked. One thing I like about AI is it's very slimming. Yeah. We know that's not real, right? Because you've got some context. It's harder for the Jews in Jerusalem at the time the author is writing because they can see the real thing. And so what the author is doing is trying to show them, no, it's not real. It's not the real deal. It was there temporarily. It was a holding place until something better came along. And what he ultimately does in this section, he doesn't enumerate it like we like it to be done, but he gives us 5 problems with that old system. All right, so we're going to walk through these particular 5 problems. He starts off by saying now, oh, by the way, we need to go back to verse 13 of the last chapter to kind of get a running start. It says, by saying a new covenant, right? He's saying there's a new covenant that's been given to us. Last week we talked about how that came about all the way back in Jeremiah, the promise of this new covenant. It was nothing new. It says, by saying a new covenant, God has declared that the first covenant is obsolete. Now, what is obsolete and growing old is about to pass away. Has it passed away yet as of this writing? No, the temple still stands. But he's trying to get his people to understand that's not the real deal anymore. There's something new and better. He says, now the first covenant also had regulations for ministry and an earthly sanctuary. The first problem with the old covenant is it was earthly. There was an earthly sanctuary, a place, a singular location where God's people had to go to meet with him, right? What do we call that place? What did they call it? Temple. Before that, what did they call it? What does he call it? A tabernacle. What's the difference between a tabernacle and a temple? Permanence. Right? A tabernacle can move. A temple it's there. There's a foundation for it. By the way, which of the two, this is free, you don't have to pay for this. Which of the two did God prescribe? The tabernacle. Where did the whole idea for the temple come from? King David. King David said, look, I've got this mansion. I've got this beautiful place to live, and God's living in a tabernacle. I'll build him a house even better than mine. Great heart. But the problem with the temple is it doesn't move, right? If God's people leave, and by the way, did God's people ever leave Jerusalem? Yes. Why? Because God kicked them out, right? Well, the temple isn't going with them. The tabernacle could have gone with them, but the temple was a permanent place. It is earthly. There's only one place. And by the way, he says, look, there's all kinds of rules and regulations. There were rules about how it was to be built, how you were supposed to assemble it, what you were supposed to use to put it together, and how you were to actually use the tabernacle itself. Nothing was left to chance. In other words, nothing was left up to us. God said, this is how I want my tabernacle to be built. The things I want to be. He even said who he wanted to have build his tabernacle. God was in control of it, but it wasn't in heaven, it's on earth. So the first problem is it's earthly. And this temple was kind of a permanent thing. The second problem is it was symbolic. Verse 2, for a tabernacle was set up, and in the first room, which is called the holy place. Now, before we get too far, I'll show the next picture. All right, this is an image of the tabernacle. Okay, and there's two main rooms. What's this front room called? The holy place. And the one behind it? Behind the curtain is the most holy place, all right? So we're going to leave this image up as we read through this. For the tabernacle was set up, and in the first room, which is called the holy place, that front one, were the lampstand. By the way, that is a big lampstand. All right? The lampstand, I lost my place. The table and the presentation of loaves. Behind the second curtain was a tent called the most holy place. It had the gold altar of incense and the ark of the covenant, covered with gold on all sides, in which was a gold jar containing the manna, Aaron's staff that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. The cherubim of glory were above the ark, overshadowing the mercy seat. And then I love, after going into all of that, he's like, look, I'm not going to get into all the details here. There were a lot more details, but he's like, I'm not going to talk about that now. He's kind of giving us the high-level stuff, right? Here's the thing. All of this was symbolic. So, what happened in this first room? What were the things in this front room? Three things. The lampstand, the table with bread on it, and the incense altar. All right, so let's talk through what's the symbolism of each one of those. And by the way, this is not like earth-shattering stuff. The lampstand, what's it symbolic of? Light in darkness, right? What do you notice about this room, aside from the big hole, right? Pretend the big hole's not there. What else do you notice about this room? There's no windows. So in order for there to be light in this dark room, you had to have a source. And by the way, Jesus calls himself the light of the world. It's symbolic. Right? Okay, what's next? The table with the bread on it, right? All right, so what's that represent? What's that symbolic of? By the way, there were always, how many loaves were to be on that table at all times? Not 7. 12. It was 50-50, right? It was either 7 or 12. 12 loaves of bread on this table at all time, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. But what does all of that symbolize? God's provision for his 12 tribes. In fact, Jesus calls himself the bread of life, the light of the world, and the bread of life. But, okay, what's the third thing? What's that? Yeah, the incense. Actually, that's called, it said that that's actually behind the curtain, right? Isn't that what this author says? In the most holy of holy places. But is that where the altar of incense was, actually? Uh-oh. Author messed it up. Bible isn't perfect. Let's throw it away. No. Remember, this is all symbolic. What happened on the altar, on this particular altar? What kind of altar was it? Incense. What's incense for? Prayer. Today is a very different thing than it was back then. Right? Back then, what was it for? What did it symbolize? Someone said it. Prayer. The prayers of God's people rising up to him. Now, we tried, by the way, we did a whole series where we were going through and talking about the temple, and we burned incense here in this room. That was a mistake. I will never do that again. Anyone know why? It is pungent. It is powerful. It didn't matter where you went in this building, you could smell it and see it, right? So, yes, the altar was right in front of the curtain, but where did the smoke go? Everywhere. And so most theologians think that he's speaking symbolically about the prayers and how the prayers which were from God's people to God himself, that actually went behind the curtain. Now, behind the curtain. Now, by the way, how often was this front stuff used? Every day. By who? Priests. We're going to get into that. Who couldn't go into that courtyard? You and me. If we were not a priest, we couldn't even get that close, right? But then, behind this big curtain is a whole other room. And what's in that room? The Ark of the Covenant. What does the Ark of the Covenant contain? It's got the Ten Commandments, the Old Covenant, right? What else? Aaron's staff that had budded. What was that all about, by the way? Anyone know what Aaron's budding staff was for? There were a bunch of staffs, and his did bud. Why was that significant?
Because it chose Aaron as the priest.
Right. There was this whole rebellion happening with Moses and Aaron and the sons of Korah, and there was a question about who really was in leadership. And God said, bring all the tribes in. Have each one of their leaders throw a staff down, and the one that buds is the one that I've chosen. And who was chosen? Aaron. So the budded staff there is to remind us that God has chosen his royal priesthood. But there's one more thing in there. The manna. But wouldn't you just give just a little taste? Wouldn't you just like to taste a little bit of it? Which is why God has gotten rid of all of that, right? Where is the ark? Don't know. I mean, if you watch Indiana Jones, the Nazis got it, right? Who knows where it really is? It's gone. Why is it gone? Because all of this was symbolic. And we hold on to stuff like this, but he didn't want us to hold on to stuff like this. There was something real. All of this was symbolic. It wasn't the real thing. And by the way, who was this symbolic of? Jesus. It's not about a place that we go. There's a transitioning that happens. It's not about a place or a ritual. Our faith is about a person. All right? The third problem is the old system was inaccessible. Picking up in verse 6, with these things prepared like this, right, the old system, the priests enter into the first room repeatedly, performing their ministry, but the high priest alone enters the second room, and he does that only once a year, and never without shedding blood, which he offers for himself and the sins the people had committed in ignorance. Who gets to go into these places? Only the priests. You and I don't get access. I hear it talked about all the time, and I was reminded this week as I was studying this, right? We talk about when Jesus was crucified, what tore? The veil, right? Go back to that picture again. The veil separating the Holy of Holies from the Holy of Holies from the holy place, it tore in two and gave us access. But what did I say? Did I give it backwards? Yeah, okay. We didn't have access to any of that. Right? We forget the Holy of Holies. We couldn't walk into the first room. But what was the real problem with walking into the second room? In the first room, what might happen to you? If I walked into the holy place, what might happen? I might get in some trouble, right? I mean, there's probably a fine to pay, got to go to court, who knows what you had. If I walked into the Holy of Holies, what would happen? Who would kill me? God. God said, this is not where you go. This is holy ground here, and you're not holy. Which is why the priests had to have bells around the fringes to make sure they did it right, so that if the jingling stopped, they pulled the dead body out. It was serious. But all of this is inaccessible to us. How many Israelites got to see inside of this room? Only the Levites. Or they could do it once, right? All right. In fact, the other thing that's said here in verse 8, the Holy Spirit was making it clear that the way into the most holy place had not yet been disclosed while the first tabernacle was still standing. When I first read that, I'm like, what is he talking about? He's saying when this temple was standing up, there was no way for us to get to God. Right? But a whole new thing happened. Here we're secluded. In God's kingdom, we're included. Which is ironic given that everyone talks about how Christianity is so exclusive. No, it's open for everybody. Anybody. This was exclusive. What God is doing and what God has done, He's opened the doors so that you and I could walk in. All right, fourth thing, the old system was temporary. Verse 9, this is a symbol for the present time during which gifts and sacrifices are offered that cannot perfect the worshiper's conscience. They are physical regulations and only deal with food, drink, and various washings imposed until the time of the new order. He's saying, look, this stuff is only for the present time. And he just talked about the fact that Jeremiah said it was going to be replaced, torn down, and a new thing given to us in its place. It was temporary. And I think we think about temporary, I want us to think about temporary in two ways. Number one, it wasn't designed to last forever. But the second thing is, every time, go back to that picture again, every time a sacrifice was offered and the high priest went behind into the Holy of Holies and offered a sacrifice for us, how often did he have to do that? Once a year. How often could he have done it? Every day we needed it, right? I think about that, man, how depressing it would have been to be a high priest. Because you go in, you do all this stuff, get into the Holy of Holies, you atone for the people, and not more than 5 minutes after you walk out, the people need it again. Because we are broken, sinful people. So even the sacrifice that happened was temporary. It wasn't permanent. But all that was going to change, right? And then fifth, the old system was ineffective. He says it right there. Look, these gifts and sacrifices are offered, but they could not perfect the worshiper's conscience. And it was really just physical regulations about food, drink, and washing. It was symbolic. It was physical. It was not spiritual. Which is interesting. We have a faith system based on something that's not spiritual. It's all physical. And the author is saying, look, everything is about to change. In fact, if you turn to the next page, or if you're not in this Bible, to the next section, what's the title of the next section that we're going to talk about next week? The New Covenant Ministry. So next week, the author is going to start, we're going to start to shift gears. Stop talking about the old and what was, and he's going to start talking about this new ministry and what makes it so much better. Better one or two. Today we're only looking at one. But there's an important question for you and me. What does this have to do with us? First of all, is there a temple today? Is there a physical temple in Jerusalem? No. I got to be very specific with my questions. Yes. There is not a physical temple. I know, it's my fault. I blame me. There's not a physical temple in Jerusalem. There's nowhere for us to go. Are Jews today offering sacrifices following the old system? No. Why not? God took it down. If we did build the temple, would they? Yes. Because we love what we're comfortable with. We love what we know. Right? Why is McDonald's so popular? Aside from the fact that it's delicious. I love looking at your all's faces because you don't know whether I'm serious or not. And I'm not going to tell you. What's one of the things that made McDonald's so popular? It's not the great food. Consistency. You can go anywhere in the world and walk into a McDonald's and feel like you're in America. It looks the same. It is the same. No matter where you go. That's how much we love consistency. Okay, but say, Pastor, this doesn't matter because the temple's not there anymore. Yeah, but we just find a way to replace what we know with things we know. What do we know? Tradition. What are some of our traditions as Christians? Church happens on Sunday. You go to the same building. You all don't think you're creatures of habit? You all sit in the same place. Except for Dina. Dina doesn't sit in the same place. She's moving around. In fact, you love your place so much, and I know this to be true because we've tried it. If I asked you to stand up and switch places, it's like I took your firstborn away from you. No! Don't do it! I have elders' wives that are going to, throw a fit. You tell that pastor, I'm sitting where I'm sitting. My grandmother, when I did it, when she was still coming, she said, I'm not moving, and I'm too old, and you can't make me. It's built into us. We love our rituals. What else? What are other traditions we have? Christmas. Christmas is a big one. Don't mess with Christmas, right? Got to have a Christmas tree because it's in the Bible. I was going to mess with you guys for a while. You're going to go, look, I don't see one. Yeah, it's not there. Service orders. I mean, we have a very specific service order here. Anyone know what it is? How many songs? 4 songs, unless we expect the pastor's going to go long, then we got it to 3. Right? 4 songs, then what do? We pray. Then what do? Sermon. Then what do? Stack chairs. Then what do? We go home. It's very regimented system. And if we mess it up, and I know this because I've done it backwards before, we're going to do the sermon first and we're going to sing set last. And that lasts for 1 week. If I did it for 2 weeks, there'd be a revolt. How about this one? We like our specific music. What's the biggest debate in Christian circles right now? And by the way, it's been this debate forever. Yeah, old music or new music? And how many of you love the old stuff? How many of you love the new stuff? See?
How many love both?
Yeah, how many love both? How many could care less? Just let's worship, right? And by the way, did you see what happened in the room? Try being a worship pastor with all that, right? By the way, the set this morning was fire. Yeah, it was good. But if we started doing different music here, let's say we started doing Maranatha only here. First of all, our band would quit. Our worship pastor might quit. Right? We like what we like. Just like the Israelites did. And it's as important for us not to get so wrapped up in the things we like, our rituals, our buildings, our music, our thing. Here's what we've got to make sure we do. 2 things I want to make sure we grab hold of here. Is let's not make the stuff the important thing. The church building does not matter. The kinds of chairs we have do not matter. By the way, we need new chairs. But the kind of these ones are still working. Some of them have candle marks on them. But now I just remember of a candlelight service, by the way, which is one of our rituals. You have to do Silent Night and a candlelight service on Christmas Eve. And if you don't do those things, you're probably not even saved. Right? That's how people would act, right? Because we know those things. We can feel them and touch them, and they're part of... Now, there's nothing wrong with a candlelight service. We will do a candlelight service on Christmas Eve, and we will sing Silent Night. But it is not the most important thing. Jesus is what's important. So what we've got to make sure we do is, with all of that stuff, is make sure that we keep Jesus the main thing and not the other stuff. Jesus is what's important. Jesus matters. And by the way, I was thinking this week, so I usually finish up on Thursday, the message, and then I let it kind of simmer in my head for a few days. And it's a good thing, because this week I got to thinking, the other powerful thing about this passage, about what the author is telling us here is, because he's telling his, and it's going to become more clear next week, but he's telling his listeners, look, the thing you have is good, but it's not great. Right? You're having a McDonald's burger, but you could have Five Guys. Okay, that's right, because we got to be Christian, right? All right. You could have McDonald's chicken nuggets. That's what you have now, but you could have Chick-fil-A. Right? Because that's Christian. That will save you, right? Now, chicken nuggets, McNuggets, are not good. They're good enough, but they're not good. Chick-fil-A, man, they must pray over that batch or something, right? It's so delicious. He's saying, look, you're feasting, you're living on McNuggets when you could have Chick-fil-A and the sauce and everything. You've got something better. And what's important for you and me is to realize we have that something better, and we've had it for so long, we don't even know how good we've got it. And we still sometimes try and help God along in the process. And he's saying, look, you don't have to go into the holy place. You don't have to go into the Holy of Holies. Because what I've done is I've made you my temple. And God resides in the hearts of his people. Life is tough, right? It's tough enough. We don't need to. I want you to get this in our thick heads. We do not need to worry about our salvation and whether we're being good enough or not good enough. Can I let you in on a secret? You're not being good enough. It's not possible. You can't do it. You can keep trying and you'll keep failing. Right? And that's what Einstein says is insanity. Jesus says, look, I'm coming. You have all the chicken nuggets you can eat, and you don't have to worry about it. Your salvation is secure in me. You don't have to go to a place to earn it. You don't have to do anything to earn it. It is my free gift to you. Why don't we live it that way? So here's my challenge for you today. Forget tomorrow. Today, act like, just pretend for a little bit that Jesus died on the cross, was buried, rose again, and is coming back. Everything else is just fluff. Right? Let's keep Jesus the main thing. Let's stand and pray. Father, thank you for this good day that you've given us, for this opportunity to be in your house. And I am so thankful that we do not have a temple or a tabernacle that we have to go to. We come to church simply to be around other temples, other Christians who love you and care about you, and to worship and exalt and glorify you together as the body of Christ. Not the temple in Jerusalem, the body of Christ. You call us to be a light to the world as you are the light of the world. You are the bread of life that sustains us. You are the one that ushers us into the very presence of God. And you give us a new covenant. And all we need to do is love you and love the people around us. But Father, we confess that we fail at that more often than we like to admit. But still, our salvation is secure in you. Thank you for that. As we walk out these doors, let us live that way. Have that heart, that hope, the joy that comes from having all of that secure and not having to worry about it. And all God's people said,